Hi, I'm Jamin Brazil, and you're listening to the Happy Market Research Podcast. My guest today is Leonard Murphy, author of the GreenBook Research Industry Trends. That's the GRIT report. He's partner in G2 Advisors, director at Veriglif, advisory board member on many different startups and companies, investor, and industry change agent. Started in 1962, the GreenBook is a wholly owned subsidiary of the New York American Marketing Association and is a worldwide directory of marketing research companies and focus group facilities. Veriglif is a private permission-based blockchain creating a data ecosystem around respondent data ownership, increasing transparency and security. Lenny, thank you so much for joining me on the Happy Market Research Podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Let's start a little bit with the origin story. I should say let's start. That's not true. We've already started. But let's move on to the origin story of Leonard Murphy. Tell me a little bit about your parents and how that's informed your career.
Well, my dad was military, so Air Force for 20 years. And then he went into government service, worked for the VA. So they were older. So my parents were Depression era. My dad served in World War II and in Korea. So different kind of value system. I was raised by the greatest generation parents. So that was interesting.
I bet.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, I thought that was awful. Now I'm, far more grateful for it. When I was, 17 and had a mohawk and thought that I was Mr. Punk Rock, total rejection of those values. And of course, like all of us do, by the time I was probably 20, realized, oh, well, actually, maybe they were smarter than I thought that they were. So now they both passed away quite a few years ago. And, I certainly miss them. I wonder what they would think of the world that we live in today, but I like to think that at least they'd be proud of the life that I've built that's far more aligned to the life they tried to build as well than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's it's funny you have that Depression era. I mean, that's my grandparents' framework, right? My grandmother would literally save saran wrap in the 80s.
Yeah. Oh, my dad never threw anything away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like such a different point of reference than us. And it's, gosh, I mean, I like that. I'm a dad of teenage boys, and I like to think that on the outside of it, they're going to look back and go, gosh, my dad wasn't such an asshole. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so I have two 23-year-old daughters and a 21-year-old daughter, and then we have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old, right? So
yeah, it's full house, man.
But the cool thing is that although the 23-year-olds were beginning to get to that point where maybe I'm not such an asshole as well that I was just a few years ago. Now, maybe that has something to do with they still depend on me to pay for their for school.
That's
and
right.
all those kind of things.
That's
right. But I haven't been called an asshole by my older kids in a few years. And I take that as I'm doing something right, because there was a time where I was.
So kind of reflecting on your parents, then we'll move on. Like, what was one of the big lessons or core values that that generation imparted to you that you have sought to impart to your family?
Help people. They were always trying to help other folks. My dad would give the shirt off his back. Now, he would make sure that you knew he was giving you the shirt off his back and you owed him for that. But he still would go out of his way to try and help people. We always had, they were foster parents, so we always had foster kids in the house, and that was good and bad. But it was still a powerful lesson that you try and help people, and that's certainly something that we've tried to instill in our kids as well. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And it's funny how that's like played out like in our kind of preface of the episode piece into your career and core values and character. I remember my grandfather, it's interesting you bring that up. I haven't thought about this in many years. My grandfather, during World War II, he had some physical disabilities because he'd been shot and whatever. And so he couldn't go to war. And they started in our area, a small group of small farmers, there was a large contingent of Japanese-owned farms. Okay. So when they did the Japanese internment camps, then my grandfather helped lead a group of people that, farmers, that wound up taking care of the farms of the Japanese people.
Wow.
While they were away. So that when, they were later released, they were able to come back to working farms as opposed to, desolation.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And, I think you're right. Like that generation had, we've replaced that like neighbor connection with a digital connection. I've been thinking about like the digital nomad, et cetera, kind of framework. And it's going to be interesting to see. It's just different. I'm not judging it as right or wrong, but there's definitely strength, probably in both, but there's definitely strength in that, a proximity-based relationship.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've made choices that both my wife's family and my family. She's an Atlanta native. I am not, but most of my family settled here in Atlanta. We've just made the choice to be here.
Right.
And a lot of that is so we can be close to family and help and be a part of their lives. And we value the stability of our kids growing up with lifelong friends and neighbors. And, those are very purposeful decisions that we want them to have those real connections as well. Now, me personally, I'm probably far more digitally connected than anybody in my family. But I've tried to kind of maintain that same, at least, sense of neighborliness, of helpfulness. And whether it hasn't been a substitute, but it does help. If I don't have that connection to people of just being a part of their lives in some level, I don't feel good about myself.
Right.
It sucks. I don't like that feeling of isolation. So
it's so good. Having that self-awareness is so important. So I want to talk about the Grit Report. A lot of people, all the people, including myself, we see the Grit Report as this thing that is the herald of what's coming. And it sits in a very powerful position right now inside of our industry. With over approximately 600 different tools that touch market research or consumer insights in some way, being the curator of that pile of spaghetti it's really an important role, both from a brand and an agency perspective. But it didn't start there. And I think that's part of the story that most of us don't hear. I would love to hear about like that first, those early days of the Grit Report and what that was like.
So early, the original Grit Report, I worked for a company called Dial Tech. I was a VP at Dial Tech, and they did IVR, so IVR market research.
Yeah.
And this was it was early 2000s, right as the beginning of the onset of online. And we wanted to understand the industry, right, from a supplier standpoint. So I thought, let's do a survey of the industry. Then realized that, the only way we're going to get people to tell us this is if we give them the data back.
Right.
So the very first iterations of that were really a very self-serving kind of competitive intelligence survey for Dial Tech to see how the hell do you compete in the online world when you're utilizing IVR. And when I left Dial Tech, I took that with me to Rockhopper, and we kind of continued that, but with a slightly more altruistic objective. We thought, this is something that could be valuable, and that's when I met Luke Hosh at GreenBook. So he had seen the report as primitive and as it was, and said, we'd like to help with this, and that kind of established our relationship. So the first few years of it, this is the early 2000s, were kind of driven by that. Then when I had the opportunity to join GreenBook, we decided to turn that into what it is, today, and that evolution of, really is, there's no it is purely altruistic at this point, of do a report for the industry by the industry and and as a content piece, et cetera. So it's evolved since then. It continues to evolve. I mean, we're thrilled that so many people find value in it. We're thrilled that people are like the Grit 50, right? The kind of the brand tracker of
for sure,
innovative. And we've got big plans on what we're going to do in the future. So we continue to focus on how to utilize the data in new ways. We're exploring a platform right now called Ingwo that is a causal analysis platform versus a correlation analysis platform. And we've got enough data that we think we can start doing some more interesting things that can become really useful tools for especially the supplier community.
That's interesting.
Establish some benchmarks for folks to be able to say, if you do these things, this can drive you towards success, right? These are the common elements of successful businesses. So we're experimenting with all that behind the scenes, but it's fun. And it's kind of walking the talk, right? Since it's about trying to identify what the future is and experimenting, well, we keep experimenting. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. There's things we could do better. We try and own that and keep on. So it's fun, and it keeps me busy.
When you think about the things that you've done, like really, really well, by you, I don't mean to like. I realize you're a humble person, so this is going to be hard for you to answer.
About that, but there's some who would totally disagree. My wife especially. If she was here, she'd be saying, "What?"
But like when you think about the Grit Report in general, what has it done that's like, where is its sweet spot? Where is it thriving and kicking ass and doing its best?
I really think recently, over the last few years, we focused a lot more on a deeper level analysis of trying to understand the real drivers of change in the industry, on both the client and the supplier side. So rather than just being a kind of a dump of information regarding trends, and there's still certainly a lot of that in the report, but when you dive deeper, there's a whole lot more around, these are the hallmarks of successful organizations on both the supplier and the client side. Right? These are the things they have in common. This is what that profile of organizational success looks like. And that's been very predictive of changes that we've seen in the industry, the shift from full service to technology driven. So I think it's, understanding buzz topics and seeing those play out, right? I mean, some of the things that we were talking about years ago, mobile, AI, automation, those were early indicators in Grit a few years ago. Now they are major trends, defining characteristics of the industry. So it's been highly predictive of kind of looking at the road ahead and understanding this is what's coming and this is how it's going to impact business, and then understanding these are how companies are adapting to those changes and being successful. And again, I think we can do a whole lot better than we are, but I'm not aware of any other report in any industry, but particularly in ours, that is that useful as a strategic planning tool. And that's not taking anything away from the other great reports. The SMART GMR, it's a great report. I read it every year. There's lots of great stuff in it. I think this is just really focused on the pragmatic aspects of the business of the industry, whether you're on the client side or the supplier side.
So when you think about like starting a business in this space, on the technology side specifically, right, fitting inside of the Grit sort of scope, what do you see as the companies that are standing out and winning in that space? Like what is the differentiator there versus the other company? Because there's a lot of entrants. I mean, I counted, I don't know, I counted over 75, I don't know exactly if that's the right number, but it was about 75 exhibitors in Austin at IAEX. So like there was, and it might have been more, but there was a lot of, there's a lot of people there. So what is the hallmark? What are you seeing as the hallmark of the companies that are winning in the market?
Yeah, that's just interesting. I mean, certainly on the surface, what they all have in common is the cheaper, faster, better rubric.
Yeah.
It's the better part that is less easily definable. And I think that's probably where the differentiation occurs. There's lots of companies that can do cheaper and faster.
Yeah.
The better part is not just the data, but it's also the service. And that is where a lot of the tech companies really struggle because they're tech companies. They don't want to develop service, right? I mean, we're all chasing that Silicon Valley valuation model, and everybody's taught, oh, you can't have if too much of a service component in the business can't be valued as a tech company, and all that's true, it's accurate, but there is not a single company that has been successful in this industry selling to the client side. I should be clear on that. That has not had to develop a significant service capability in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, they just haven't had. I mean, even Qualtrics, right? We look at that Qualtrics valuation, and Qualtrics, they've got a very large service organization. Now, I think I'm not sure how that's accounted for in the books.
It's called goodwill. On the M&A side, I just had a conversation yesterday with Steve, CEO of Methodify, on this exact topic, and that is the role of services in technology has to be in market research has to be coupled, because customers need the support when they need the support, and they want that's part of the whole product, but it's not an excuse for bad UI.
Right.
So like the user experience side of things still needs to be, I still think you win there, but you have to have best in class white glove experience for the customer.
It's interesting. So this is one of those, as we try to walk the talk, we saw this trend in the GreenBook side, so we invested in building Savio because the thinking was all right, the best way to help technology companies just be technology companies, but still deliver on the service, was to create a marketplace component so they could tap into the service on demand. Which
for me makes like perfect sense, by the way.
Me too. I still think I'm right. But the industry would not agree with me. Now, not that I wasn't right, but from an adoption standpoint, it's been a real challenge. I'll be upfront about that, right? I still think that the time for Savio hasn't quite arrived yet. It's coming. We're still continue to, tweak and the model. But that gig economy component, and I think this doesn't just apply to our industry, has not reached full potential yet, because there's still I think the business sense is, build, buy, or partner. And when it comes to service, it's easier to build because you can manage the inputs, right, as we were talking about earlier, more easily. So when your business is dependent upon a service component and you outsource that, then you lose the control. So therefore quality can become a challenge, and your differentiator can go away. So I think that's still companies are just defaulting to, I just have to build this internally. So we can manage it to make sure that the quality is there to deliver on the client's need, even though they don't want to.
Right.
So that was kind of the disconnect with Savio as well. I still think that logistically and pragmatically it makes perfect sense, and some companies have adapted it and others haven't. But managing the quality control process is a challenge if you don't own it internally.
Yeah, and part of the challenge there too is, I think, we'll pick on Methodify. I don't know very much about the business, so I'm completely blind here. But in the brief conversation that I had with them, you've got a technology, but so that's kind of like the entrant into the transaction or the relationship, the customer relationship. And then there's this augment opportunity of support. And so, it feels right now like it's a little bit different if they're utilizing a brand like Methodify, then, or I'm sorry, if they're using a platform like Methodify, then they want that support in context of that relationship,
right?
As opposed to more of the lucid marketplace sort of framework. But I think where the standout is like focus group procurement, which is this massively segmented space. Even with Schlesinger, being probably the largest, are they the largest network, you think?
I
Close.
think now they are, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, in the top 2, 3, anyway, you still don't have global coverage. So like, my point is that I think the marketplace framework works really well when there isn't a whole product that exists for the consumer.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Methodify actually is a really interesting company from a kind of a trend standpoint. You think they're a company that I would call kind of full stack. So I kind of, the dichotomy that I'm seeing in the industry, we're talking about this in the latest group report, is kind of full stack versus full process. And I'll explain what the difference is that. But, because they start with Delvinia, right? Delvinia is a full service company, full service research company. They saw the automation trend coming along.
Yeah.
And they wanted to tap into that, but they didn't want to outsource it through, let's say, Zappy.
Right.
So they wanted to control the value chain themselves.
Right.
So they created Methodify as an internal resource that they could also productize and externally sell. So they had multiple entry points for the client, right? You just want the kind of DIY automated solution, low cost, low barrier of entry. We've got that now.
Right.
So you need something that has a service component, but not full service. Well, that's great because they have a connection to Delvinia. So they can address that need internally from a service standpoint. Or you need full service, then they've got Delvinia, which is very similar to what Periscope by McKinsey did.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, and they built their whole framework of low cost tools. It's what Kantar did when they kind of pulled out of Zappy and launched their marketplace. So we're seeing this evolution of companies that are trying to play on both sides. And having the multiple tiers of points of entry for the business, and that's kind of the full stack, right? Then the full process, or now this other direction where we see companies like LRW, for instance, or HotSpecs, or even System One said, we're not necessarily going to go down that path much. They've done some things, but instead they want to own more of the marketing life cycle. So they've been expanding kind of horizontally into taking, agencies, the business of agencies and activation, and pulling that into the research business. So it's kind of like what if WPP had really integrated Kantar, right, kind of across the board. But those that seem to be the two defining styles that are happening overall with companies kind of various points on the spectrum in that evolution between those two sides of the business.
I mean, I didn't listen to the startup pitch competition this last year in Austin, but do you remember who the winner was?
Yes. So
I was, in my defense, I was doing podcasts on site.
I know you were.
So it wasn't like I was messing around.
Yeah. So UX Reality by Cool Tool.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool story.
It is. I mean, so full disclosure, I'm an advisor.
I didn't know that. Incidentally, all the shows mentioned, all the companies mentioned on this show are going to be completely surprised, hopefully delighted. So this is not like a paid placement.
No. But
bullshit like that, listeners.
No. But I try and be transparent about those things. But they're a company that, they've pivoted so many times, right, over the years. Cool Tool. They're from the Ukraine, and super smart guys, and they started early on. They had almost a Savio type model. Then they had a Zappy type model, and before these companies, they really saw the opportunities here. And then they took kind of the marketplace for non-conscious measurement, and they built a whole very sophisticated platform to do a variety of those things, but just couldn't catch. They didn't have the killer app,
right? So
then they built UX Reality as a very specific app to try and understand on mobile device everybody your point of experience, integrated eye tracking and all that cool stuff. And so that just shows from an entrepreneurial standpoint, they just kept trying until they got it right. They entered the competition 4 times.
Did they really? I did not know that. Four
Yeah,
times.
4 times, and they kept learning, right, and getting it better and better, and being very, very iterative. And it's a powerful story of entrepreneurial success.
I've got to
right?
get them on the show. I love, and it's interesting. The 4 times is really interesting because I had a lot of people, at least a dozen, after that, come by where I was doing the podcasting, and they would talk about, wow, those guys are so smart. They've really figured it out. And it sounded like, they fell off the back of a truck and they had this like really, and were magically successful. And they had this like really smart, path. And this is real clear and we're just going to nail it.
Nope.
So, it's good to hear that.
Yeah. Years of trial and error and pivoting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's an incredibly useful lesson for any entrepreneur. I don't know, I've written so many business plans in my life that I realize the worthlessness of the exercise. I recognize the value of the exercise, but when, I think there's a quote, I don't remember it exactly, but something I think was military of, every plan is brilliant until you enter the battlefield.
Right. Totally. Mike Tyson has a similar quote.
Okay. Yeah. And that's certainly an experience from that company, and even my own experience. Savio did all the research, brilliant. We got it. We know what we're going to do. Until you get into the market and realize, well, shit. Okay,
nope.
About that.
I just got hit in the face.
Oh, okay. So we adapt, right?
That's right.
Yeah, you tweak. So anyway.
Yeah, for sure. So, industry's going through a lot of transition, has gone through a lot of transition. What is one of the biggest themes that you've seen over the last couple of years inside of the market research space?
Well, there's that dichotomy we talked about before, kind of the new settling of how do we define the kind of the business models of the industry. Certainly consolidation.
Oh, that's been crazy lately. Let's actually dig in on this point. Are you seeing like, do you think we're at the top of the curve, or do you feel like we're going to plateau? And then it's interesting to me having so much private equity and venture capital money, you've seen the data, market research is a hot topic. You and I were the nerds in the corner looking at the girls that we were, you know what I mean? Like there was nobody dancing. Right. We were not dancing.
Right.
We were afraid to go.
They were laughing at us like, what?
Right. Yeah, exactly. There was no like Michael J. Fox cool factor with us, right? We were definitely the McFly. And now all of a sudden, there's a spotlight that's on top of market research. You've seen these, in my opinion, remarkable valuations. I mean, forget about Qualtrics. Just put that on the side.
Yeah.
You have, you have Dynata, which I'm not sure that they released it, but it was released. I saw it on Reuters. They're over $3 billion valuation. I haven't, obviously seen the book or any private data there, but the word on the street is it's about a $600 million business, maybe more, maybe less. But my point, more. Okay, great. So, but the point being though that it's a lot of pass through. You got incentive, you got recruitment. There's a big cost basis in that side of the business for it to get that type of a multiple, right?
Well, I mean, they became a cash machine. I mean so I think that.
Okay, so they are an ATM. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the interesting thing is for the past. So I guess as a byproduct of grit. So we are approached by private equity investors all of the time.
Sure,
to
of course.
Help, consult or just run ideas past us, and it happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we've even played ourselves in working through some different theses for private equity and investment. So understand how that works. It's a mature industry, so it's primed for disruption. I don't think we're at the top of the cycle. I think we're seeing the largest players, obviously, go through that process now. When we're waiting here, we have to Nielsen any day now, but I think the only company that's going to be left standing is Ipsos. As far as kind of independent.
Yeah.
And they're public.
They're public. Yeah, in France.
Yeah. So so we'll see. The big question is what happens when companies are that large and they go into private equity, and private equity is always looking for an exit. I don't know where the exit is for a private equity company to come in to Dynata or in a Kantar or GFK? Where do they go? I don't see clarity on that yet, which is probably why I don't work for a private equity company, right? They have a thesis on that. But when you're going to pay, what I think Kantar is $6 billion, I think, 4 billion, whatever the number is, a big ass number. But who are they going to sell to? I don't see where that goes. And I have the same question about Dynata. I totally get they are a cash cow. They arbitraged the hell out of that business when they merged with SSI and bought Critical Mix. Those were all arbitrage plays. They increased their EBITDA significantly. They're spinning out tons of cash. And they look really attractive for private equity. But a $3 billion private equity investment, what happens then? So are they going to go public, right? I mean, that's what Bain did with Macromill. So, maybe that's the play. I personally think a strategic makes more sense, and particularly a strategic like a Qualtrics or a SurveyMonkey that has a lot of cash but doesn't have a lot of data, but they want to make a data play. That makes more sense to me.
Maybe a Salesforce.
I've thought about Salesforce many times, even a Microsoft. Or Oracle.
LinkedIn.
I think LinkedIn is going to get bought by somebody else anyway.
Well, they're already owned by Microsoft.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about they entered into the market research place, and then obviously retracted a couple of years later, and everyone was terrified when they entered because they are there's no arguing they're the best panel.
I have heard there is a rumor
for B2B.
Just a rumor. Yep. That SurveyMonkey was working with them.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Not from you.
Okay, good.
But it is a rumor. I mean, I'm not.
It's a rumor.
This is not the conspiracy theory show. But
right. It makes sense. It makes sense. They see the value, right? So we'll see. But that consolidation at the upper levels, there will be mid-market private equity companies that they're already in play. We got LRW and et cetera, et cetera. There will be more plays like that as companies get to that kind of 50 to 100 million range. The problem is there's not that many companies in our space that are at that range. So
right, you're absolutely right. And
they'll be the next platform, right?
There's really not that many companies in general that kind of fit that mid-market $100 million, to $500 million type framework. There's just not a lot of businesses that are sitting there. And to your point, I think those are very attractive if you can build them and that's where Tulune is kind of interesting for me is they're sitting out, right? They're still sitting out, Frederick's done a beautiful job of navigating 2 decades or more than that, of tumultuous times. Well, actually 2 decades. And that business has just continued to maintain, in my opinion, a heck of a lot of relevancy and cutting edge. They've got their whole, they've pivoted their panel from panelists and respondents to influencers. And I thought that move, even though I don't think marketing wise, it needs to get touted more, but it's been just huge. I'm a member of probably all the panels as a respondent, and they do a really nice job, I think, on the management side of it.
I think so too. There's a few diamonds in the rough, for whatever it's worth. I think not diamonds in the rough. I think the best kept secrets. Tulune is one. I agree. AYTM is another, and I am an advisor, but I'm an advisor because
I love
they're
great company.
Yeah. Hotspecs, another, and that's not disparaging anybody else. I mean, these are just companies that I know really well, and I think these have the potential. And there's more. I'm not going to rattle off the whole list, but
they can find them in the Grit Report.
That's right. A lot of the Grit 50. So that really has potential to get to that next level. And what holds them back is capital.
Yeah.
Right. That's it.
Totally.
How do you throw money? I mean, most of them are organic. I mean, Tulune is not, but but most of those other companies haven't taken money. They've been bootstrapped. They've grown nice, good-sized businesses, but they're not really attracted to VCs yet because they're not tech-based, right? Or fully tech-based, there's a service component, or they've decided just not to go down that route because they don't want to sell their souls, which is my experience with venture capital. And they're not big enough yet for private equity. So that in-between space where they've built really successful, they're more than lifestyle businesses, but they haven't quite reached the ability to become scalable yet. Again, Tuluna's an exception; they're a big business, right? But there's still limits in where they can go, and that's a disappointing aspect of the industry. There's some great companies, great operators, great leaders that have so much potential, but the numbers don't always work, right? And I think hopefully that's beginning to change with the interest in the industry, that folks recognize there can be a lot more value produced.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And, I keep coming back to like with the recommendation of influencer marketing, like they should be thinking about raising up themselves people like you and I who can be the voice boxes for in a value way, for their specific or representing connected to their specific brands. Right. And I continue to believe that like that is a big marketing opportunity for, like I think like AYTM is a great example. They're big enough where they could afford an extra head count and kill something like that.
Well, like Vision Critical did with Ray Pointer for a while.
Yes, right? I know. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ray Pointer is a perfect example. Like if I was running a ship right now, which I'm not Happy Market Research, I am the ship. I've got Shui and Matt as my team, but you know what I mean? I'd be thinking like Ray Pointer for me would be an easy dollar to spend.
Yeah.
He can't post anything bad. Everything gets feedback.
Yeah. So I agree. And that's part of, the advisory roles that I take. There's a little bit of that there.
Sure.
Trying to help folks, but anyway.
How will the market research space be? Like fast forward, private equity comes in, 5 years passes. You have a bunch of transactions in the next probably 12 months. Probably some roll-ups, probably some move into brands. So that's going to create some additional white space inside of the market research world. What is your point of view, your crystal ball saying we're going to look like in 2024, 25?
I keep waiting for one of the big strategy consultancies to buy somebody in the space. They're making plays, right? They have offerings for sure, but an acquisition. And, so I could see.
Talking about like a Bain or a McKinsey or.
Yes. Accenture.
Yep.
They're making data plays. They're making marketing plays. But I haven't seen them do a research play other than Periscope, right? I think Deloitte has one as well. But I keep waiting to see that, right? And it wouldn't surprise me if, let's say, an LRW, there probably would be a candidate for that. They're reaching the end of their life cycle from their private equity, right? They grew big, so they could probably exit at, $600-700 million at this point.
Yeah, they're big.
And that's a pretty good bite for a company like for one of the big consultancies. It's not out of the realm. They can write the check,
Totally.
But they get a lot of value out of it. So that would be one thing that I keep looking for, or more plays from the tech companies as well. Salesforce, they invested in SurveyMonkey when they went public.
Yeah, they sure did.
I keep waiting for them to buy somebody outright. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if Salesforce made a play for Dynata. If Greg Archibald, my partner in Gen 2, was here, he'd say, no, it's going to be a Bain, and maybe, but I still think it would make a lot of sense for it to be a Salesforce.
Yeah.
So those two things, right? I think that we're going to look, that dichotomy between service and technology will continue, but the dominant players will be different than they are today, right? We'll look at, the great big consultancies, great big tech companies will look a whole lot more like the drivers versus, today kind of the freestanding, the Nielsen Kantar.
What do you think from a technology point of view? Like, 5G's out. I don't know if you've used it. I've used it. It's amazing. Been in different markets. I don't live in one where it's 5G, but it's crazy fast. That enables VR, right? In a and augmented reality.
Right.
research. Do you think like those types of technologies are going to play a role in the next, like in a material role, not just like a disruptive, not just like a, oh, that's cute and neat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think we're still looking for the use cases.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big tech geek. I love VR. I think it's exciting. It hasn't hit. We were talking before here. Virtual qual. It's been around for 15 years.
Right.
But it still has not hit big.
Right.
It's getting there, but it's not big. So it's taken 15 years for that technology to just become, a quasi disruptive force.
Right.
So I don't know where we are with, but yet mobile only took 5. So if VR or AR can hit the same adoption curve that mobile did, it will become an incredibly disruptive force in the next few years. We haven't seen the killer use for consumers yet, right? When there is a full VR immersive TV that you can buy for less than $1,000, and all the content is streamed in VR, maybe, right? That may be the killer app that then knocks everything down, but we haven't seen that yet.
Right.
So I think we're still a few years out. But 5G is important, right? The bandwidth is the limiter on that, just as mobile coverage was the limiter initially for mobile. So we'll see. I don't know what the next killer app tech is. I think it's continuing to be around, for now, around efficiency, AI and automation, right? It's just make things faster and cheaper. Until there's something that changes the paradigm of how humans engage with.
Really, I mean, there's the biggest paradigm shift that we've seen in our careers, right, is from pen and paper / call centers to online. Yep. And, mobile, I would argue, is really just kind of a variant or a augment of that transition.
But it changed the form factor. The form factor was a significant shift in mobile. So.
Yes, totally right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. The interesting part about that disruption was that it was cost neutral largely or even additive for the buyer. So it's cheaper. So they're already going to spend, let's say, $100,000 on a survey. And now it's just a question of, do I want to spend it here or do I want to spend it online? And right, so it was a really easy, there wasn't any like budget argument. It was just a methodological argument. And I think what I'm seeing in the space when you're talking about, AI empowered tools or, qual at scale and all this kind of stuff, right? We don't exactly have that direct comparable to, like, the comparable is, I'm going to do a focus group, or I'm going to do 10 focus groups, right? Or I'm going to we'll pick on remesh sessions. You know what I'm saying? So, and then it becomes like, it doesn't feel like it's an apple to apple scenario.
Yeah. I mean, I can envision a future where we have, for ideation, right, and new product development, that is a virtual experience, even connected to a 3D printer, right? Yeah. And rapid iterative prototyping of things.
I would love that.
Yeah, and I think that's super cool. That gets me, my geek button all. Ooh, yeah, that'd be great. And it's being done. There are companies doing that, right? And there are brands that are experimenting with that. It's just kind of reaching critical mass across the board. The biggest issue, though, and I want to be conscious of time, is I think data privacy. Mm-hmm. That will be something that we've had to pay attention to because of GDPR. But when the news hit yesterday, that no surprise, the Department of Justice is going to do a big antitrust investigation of the big tech companies. Data privacy is not the tip of the spear on that, but it will be an output of that.
Absolutely right. And you think about, so qual has been under a lot, I don't know why I'm picking on qual right now with you, but like focus groups there's a lot of them. I don't know how many different facilities, thousands, maybe 1,500 to 2,000. And so in that,
it's 20% of the industry. Right?
Yeah, it's a big piece, but yet they've been under, do you think that focus groups are going to continue to contract as a segment or spend, or do you think there's an opportunity for growth there?
So we mentioned private equity, and 2 years ago, we had an investor come and say, what's your thesis, and we'll back it. Right?
Wow.
Well, it ended up all falling apart, but but the thesis was that qual was stable. Mm-hmm. and it was going to remain stable. And I still believe that. So there's no evidence yet that virtual has taken away from qual. I think it's expanded the pie. I don't think that it's there's been some cannibalization, right? Of course there's been some, but most of the emphasis on online qual has now been about new use cases like remesh, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, or invoke, right? Those are not.
Invoke's a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've been around forever. So, so there's no evidence that facilities are, the traditional paradigm of a face-to-face qualitative session is going away. And I think facilities have to struggle to find new ways to repurpose their facilities, right? I think anytime you own a facility, any infrastructure, you've got to find ways to make that profitable. Same thing the phone centers had to do, right? But I don't think it's going to go away. I think we're going to see more and more use cases expand, right? We've seen now sensory. We're nowhere near sensory being able to be done online yet.
Right.
The tech, there is tech in its infancy to smell and maybe taste. I haven't seen that, but
that's terrifying.
Well, 3D print.
There you go. Oh, I know we're at top of the hour. Okay, listen, we're going to cut this off right now. I have one last question for you. What is your personal motto?
My personal motto, well, being a Star Wars geek, never tell me the odds.
I love that.
Never tell me the odds.
That's great. That's a good one to end on. That was perfect. My guest today has been Leonard Murphy, author of GreenBook Research Industry Trends. That's the Grit Report. Partner in G2 Advisors, director at Veriglif, advisory board member. I had to take a breath in there. Investor and change agent. Yeah, I actually cut it down quite a bit. Thank you very much, Lenny, for joining me on the Happy Market Research podcast today.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Hey, all of you who are listening, please take the time to screen capture, share this episode. I love the fact that our listenership is growing. We've exceeded well over 50,000 of you. So thanks. Keep it going. Have a great rest of your day.